Good morning, everyone. I will speak about some results of two comparative research studies in the south part of Switzerland that concern school trajectories of two disadvantaged social groups, and also a reflection about we call them latent effect of public supporting policy to these two groups. Oops, a moment. So the two main questions of this presentation are if the joint action of the actors working in the education system and the social aid system can attenuate inequality in education, compulsory and post-compulsory, and also if this action can have some latent effects. So to try to give an initial answer, we will present the result of the two studies. The first is about youngsters who attend the educational center for minors. And the second, it's about those who receive a direct economic aid from the state. Okay, but first of all, I think it's useful to do some background information about the Swiss educational system, only to better understand all the implications. So in Switzerland, primary and lower secondary school is the responsibility of the canton, so of the region. And the post-compulsory education, and in particular the vocational training, in particular vocational training, are under the responsibility of the central state. And a very important goal for the national goal is that 95% of young people could be in possession of a post-compulsory qualification from high school or from vocational training. This is the goal. And so there are many studies and many research about the fact that how attain this goal, because at the moment we are about 85%. So so in general, the public policy are interested to know how increase this rate. An interesting aspect of the social system of Canton Ticino is that it's a relatively comprehensive school system in the compulsory education level. In a country, Switzerland, where most of the cantons adopt a selective school system. So this is a peculiarity of the educational system of Canton Ticino. Another aspect who is very concerned of this goal of 95% of young retired graduates is the importance of the vocational training. Vocational training in Switzerland is very important and is a very important vector of social inclusion, much more for people from lower social class. We can see in some comparative quantitative studies that there are a lot more of young people issued from lower social class, from less advantaged social class, that attend vocational training. So this is only a schema that you can understand how is structured the school social system in Switzerland and who is placed the vocational training. So now about methodologies of the research. So as I said, we had combined the results of two studies concerning two policies who concern youngsters who are particularly vulnerable. The first is about the host of educational center for minors. This educational center of minors probably is an institution very common in most of countries. So there are institutions that offer educational and social aid to children who cannot count on family support because of a lot of different problems. In part of these children will stay in this ICM only a few hours per day, but in many cases, in other cases, they will live in there. In these studies, we explore this situation in a quantitative with quantitative method, in particular analyzing marks of this scholar in comparison with the courts who is concerned, and with interviews with social operator, but mostly with the youngster. The second study is about youngsters who received a direct economic aid, and so they received money. They don't are host of an ICM, but they receive an economic aid to can attend their studies, for example. When they are there, very young, they receive the aid. It's the family who receive the aid. But when they till 18 years old, they receive directly this aid. So some information about the study. The sample are about 3,000 people in the two studies, and they are explored in the period 2007-2015 as concern the person who received economic aid, and 2007-2000 for the people who attending ICM. The typology of the survey of direct economic aid is a purely longitudinal studies, but the ICM studies are pseudo longitudinal. So we took in count different cohorts on the same time. As I said, the survey is quantitative and qualitatives. The subject are mainly student, in some case social worker. What we can't explore, it was for ICM studies, it was essentially primary school, the transition between primary school and low secondary school, and secondary school. And also we have some data about post-compulsory education. As concerns the economic aid, we haven't any data about primary school and transition primary school, lower secondary school, but we have data about lower secondary school, transition between lower secondary school and post-compulsory education, and some data about post-compulsory education. So now some a little selection of results. So as concerns the primary school, so what it means, and now we are talking about students who attend the ECM. What we see is that primary school pupils attending ECM achieve worse results than the other pupils since the first year. That was quite interesting, because in general the marks in the first year of primary school are in general very high, but we saw that for ICM pupils it was not the case. As you can see, these pupils attend worst mark than all the other classical social class based on the professional status of parents. We also see that the school results are still worst in all the 5 years, and in particular in the most important discipline, for example, Italian, mathematics, and less in other discipline like creative education, graphic education, and also very interesting. They receive really worst marks in the and what concern behavior and diligence. That there are two marks that receive in primary school. As we can see, the transition to lower secondary school, we can see that the marks get worse in the main subject, in particular in mathematics and in Italian. But, and that is an interesting phenomenon to understand, they might tend to improve more than the rest of the course in what it's concerned behavior. So in primary school, these pupils are more criticized for behavior than in lower middle school. That is a phenomenon that we will try to understand. In what concern the lower secondary school, we can see that the pupils from who attend ICM and also they who receive the social economic aid tend to have the lower level I'm sorry, but I have a little problem here. Okay. So from a curricular point of view, both children from ICM and who received the economic aid are really overrepresented in intermediate and basic course. This intermediate and basic course don't give access to high school. This is a particularity of the Swiss social educational system. In particular, a percentage close to 30% attend the so-called curricular differentiation, which imply the exemption from certain subject and the frequency of more practical course conceived for a student with severe school difficulties. In what concerns the transition to post-compulsory and to the post-compulsory education, we have some data only about the student who receive the economical social aid. We can see that very few of them attend high school, so what we call baccalaureate school, and a lot and much more of them, in comparison of the court, they attend what we call the transition solution. What it means, they don't can achieve directly after the lower middle school, a high school, or even a vocational training. So they have to attend this transitional solution, and they are about 12, but maybe more, 12% of this social group, and in the rest of the court is less than 3%. Another interesting aspect about the post-compulsory training that we saw is that for what concerns post-compulsory education, the dropout rate is really high. So for people who receive economic aid is 55%. For the rest of the court is 15%. And of the court, we analyzed nobody of the court, so 300 people had achieved a high school graduation. So the 35% has achieved a professional certificate, 10% is still in training, but it means that it has orientation or deformation, and more than half has dropped out. And you can understand that about the goal of 95%, the national goal of 95% is very, it's very, very strange data. So, and then at the beginning we said that it was a problem about the fact, and so we had to reflect why, which kind of phenomena could partially explain these important differences, and when we interviewed these young people, we perceived very very strongly that they say, no, at school I was very discriminated, no, and so we considered the written evaluation, that in general only in compulsory school the students receive also a written evaluation, not only marks. And so we analyzed always in a comparative with a comparative approach this kind of written assessment, and we saw that not only the assessment of the young people of the two disadvantaged group was in general worst, but most important things, it were a lot of personal judgment. So most of the in general, if you consider the full court, most of the judgment are strictly scholar judgment about scholarity. For example, he has problem in maths, no, but and not very often there are some judgment about personality. But for these two group, for the group of ICM who attend ICM, we remarked a lot of negative judgment about personality. He is impolite. He has difficulty to work with other people. This kind of judgment, no? And the overall impression was that the teacher know that their judgment will not be read by emotionally involved parents, but mostly other educational professional. This is an important hypothesis we will explore more, because it's much more difficult to do a critical judgment who is read by a parent who is emotionally implied because it's his son, his daughter, no? But when you write and you know that there is another social worker, another educational worker, it could be different. This is an aspect we have to explore more. And what concern the people with the student with who received economical aid, we remarked that they had an experience of a different form of stigmatization, which occur later in the social paths. So when they reach the age of majority, they become directly beneficiary of this economic support. And this entail obligation of professional integration that that could limit their school choice. For example, I remember a youngster that said, "Okay, I started my high school graduation." So he had before did a professional certificate, and then his intention was to start a high school graduation, but he couldn't because he had to quit because it was most important that he could find directly a job. So he was very limited in this in his possibility of professional development, and this person said that it was very, very rude for him to accept this fact that he couldn't study. No, and so this the dimension of stigmatization is really that they are young. They still are very young people, but they are treated like adults. No, now you receive money and you have to get a job as soon as possible, and this is very difficult for them to accept. So they are the really first issues about possible latent effect. We will to understand much more in a future. And about conclusion, we can say that youngsters that during the school years have to cope with serious family trouble or with situation of economic deprivation, we saw that they are more at risk of school failure, even if there are some social policy that try to support them. And a factor that it seemed for us clear that there is a process of stigmatization and also of self-stigmatization. For some of these youngsters, it's very difficult to accept that they are a student of that they have to stay in an ECM of to receive the economic aid, and I think probably there are a lot of work to do about this stigmatization phenomena, and also about the fact that they are constrained to have also an auto-stigmatization phenomena. So I think it's quite all I had to say, and I thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. So we have 5 minutes for discussion. I have prepared some questions. But if somebody wants to address a comment, so please feel free. Okay, so until you, so you can just unmute yourself. So maybe Spartaco, I think it's very interesting the fact that this. So I would like if you could clear two issues. I mean, what is your position? So you said at some point here at the end that this public policies which are against school failure, but in a sense they create it, yes. So they make it more visible. So I think maybe is the dynamics that they create the school failure, or they just make it more difficult. So it's like in case this youngster receives some public support or financial support, it's just that they're just much more in the spotlight, and it's much more visible if they are vulnerable to school failure or not. I mean, of course, this is also an element of which leads to inequality in the long run, but I think this is the visibility is much more.
Yeah, I know. There is
of visibility and of being in the spotlight. And just one more thing. I mean, the second issue I'm interested in. You are talking about the assessments of the teachers.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems that there is a certain fatalism in this research of inequality, that this is a very stubborn problem, it's difficult to address it. And did you see any elements of fatigue of the social teachers? I mean, if they are like they feel that they are against a problem which is quite difficult to solve, and how does this reflect on their daily management of the situation? So maybe we can gather some other questions if somebody would like to jump in.
I also hi. I also have a question. I was wondering if with those strategies, with the tackling the stigmatization, were you considering using the positive stories of many youngsters who went through the very disadvantaged childhood and conditions, and they managed to use it as their asset, really, as something which creates their strength and gave them life experience no one others have. And there is lots of books with that type of biographies when you can really use your disadvantage and your problems and your traumas as actually your asset and your strength, and that could be one way of tackling the stigma around those issues.
Okay.
You have 3 minutes. If this is
okay.
enough,
Okay, try very quick to answer. First, to the last question, also because it's that I remember better. So I think probably this this kind of quality of particular skills that they develop, that we know that they develop a lot of skills, they are not valorized by the traditional school. Because, for example, they are able to prepare a dinner, for example, because they have to do it in more cases, but this is not valorized they are much more independent in a lot of situations, but it's very difficult for the traditional school to valorize these competences that we knew in the interviews. About your questions, Adriana, about the first, I think one of the most problem of the fact it's not only a question of visibility is that in particular the youngster that received the social aid, the economical aid, they are really treated like adults and not like youngster. They are treated like they receive the same aid that received adults who are drop out from the work system, for the work market. And they are treated like the dropout people, even if they are not even go inside at this work market. I don't know if it's clear. For them, they are treated like a person with 40 or 50 years who is drop out after 20 years work, and they are treated like this, even if they are, even if they never had a job. I don't know if.
Yeah, I understand. Yes. So they are put in a situation that it's out of it's imposed on them, and it's a wrong reading of the situation. And
it's conceived for very adult people. No, this economic aid is a policy. See, who is conceived for adults who are drop out from the work system, and they are treated, and these youngsters are treated in the same way, even if they never had the possibility of get a job.
Okay, I understand.